Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I am Kathy Fromme. I am joining you from my sewing space at home. And I'm here today to share some holiday serging tips and tricks for you. So go ahead and grab a beverage and have a seat, and I'm going to show you a few samples to get started. I want to remind you not to click on any links that you might see. We never ask for money or your information, so don't be caught by those little spammers. They're pretty much out there these days, trying to take advantage of us through the holidays. So don't be tricked by anything like that. So today's topic is all about serging, and I titled my program Rolling Through to the Holidays Using Your Serger, because I'm going to focus primarily on rolled edges and finished edges on your serger. Today I have both the Amber Air S400 and the Amber Air S600, our newest serger, with me today. You can kind of see them in the background. I'm sorry, just checking my chat messages here. And so I'll be using both of them for some different techniques today. So the first thing I'm going to do is just show you a couple of things, a couple of samples, and this is a quick gift that you could make. This is a scarf, but it's not your ordinary scarf. It is a rectangle of fabric. So this is my rectangle folded in half. It's about 48 inches in length. Here's the fold here on this side. And it is about 22 inches in width. So basically I took about a yard and a third or a yard and 3/8 and cut it down a bit. And I took my entire rectangle. I'm going to turn it inside out. It might help you to see this better. I have an entire rectangle of fabric, and I did a rolled edge around all four sides of this rectangle. And then I folded in half. So the long side is up here at the top, and I left an opening about 14 inches or so right here. I went over to the sewing machine. I did cheat and did this at the sewing machine. And I stitched a little tiny seam. I don't even know if you can really see that, but I did a little seam up against the rolled edge to just close it up part way. And you wear this scarf sort of like a cowl. So the seam is at the back, and I'm just going to slip it over my head. And then you can arrange this like a cowl. And it's a scarf that can't fall off your neck because your head is through and your neck is holding it in place. I always lose my scarves. They end up in the mud puddles. So this is the kind of scarf for me. And I also like it because it's wider. Of course, you wouldn't have to make it this wide. If you're wearing a blazer or a jacket and you want just to kind of fill in a blouse, maybe you need something that matches better, or something for the holidays. You want to wear a print, but you don't want to go to the expense of purchasing a holiday print blouse or sweater or something. With just a little bit of yardage, you can make yourself a little scarf filler. And with a jacket over it, you never know it. And I've had some moms tell me that this would be absolutely perfect for taking care of their infants. So it would be a good little item to wear to keep in the diaper bag for those times they want some privacy with their babies. So that's my first holiday hint project for you. Let me take this off now. Okay. And yes, it is winter, so we already are experiencing static electricity. So hopefully, my hair's not on top of my head. But that's just a real quick and easy. And Amy and Meredith, I could give you guys the dimensions later on, and we can post them after the event if you would like. So the next thing on my little sample pile here is a skirt that I embellished using the rolled edge. Now this isn't, a holiday skirt or anything. This is just a everyday skirt. But I just wanted to share this technique because I swiped this from the idea from a very expensive little boutique that I saw. And they had sewn their seams of the skirt with the wrong sides together and opened them up and did a nice rolled edge down the seam of the skirt. And this skirt has little godets all around it. If I bring it back here, you can kind of see that. And adding these nice vertical lines with the rolled edge, just a neat little contrast. I'm always curious as to what, especially boutique clothing, they tend to use exposed serger seams in a lot of ways. So because that was a rolled edge, I brought that project out to just show you. If you have any questions, be sure to put them in the chat. Let us know where you are coming from, where are you watching us from today. And Amy and Meredith will feed me any questions that you may have. Okay. The next thing I have to share with you is a reversible placemat. And this is an older Viking project, and it is a quilt as you go on your serger type of placemat. So I was able to make this reversible with fall on this side. I guess my barn is upside down. Sorry about that. There we go. And on the other side is Halloween. So you could certainly do something like this for the winter season and Christmas or Hanukkah, and do double duty with that. So this is just as a quilt as you go type of placemat. So it's the quilt as you go technique, but done on a serger. And then I did finish it on the sewing machine with some binding. And I do see a question. The bottom section of the skirt, these little insets here are often called godets. They're just an insert that adds extra flair at the hem of a dress or a skirt. So it's just a triangular piece that was sewn into the seams of the skirt. Okay. All right, the next thing, pretty obvious that you can do, and certainly something that a new serger owner can get comfortable with, is doing a rolled edge on a table napkin. So this is a square table napkin, and it's about 18 inches square. All four edges are rolled edged. So it's nice and basic. You can do it in any fabric that you like. I'll show you, I'll actually do some, rolled edge serging in just a minute. But you can take this one step further for the holidays and serge a circle with the rolled edge. And it's all in the folding. So take your circle and fold it a little bit off center, so not perfectly in half. I think you can see that pretty well. And then I'm going to fan fold my circle into little pie shapes. And there's one, and there's another. Now, doing it in the air is not quite so easy as doing it flat on your table, but I think you can see that with a little creativity. Let me adjust my folds just once more. Thanks for being patient with me as I do this. There we go. I'm going to give myself a little bit more room so I have more of a like a ruffle effect happening, and then fold it back and forth to create my Christmas tree. And then you can put a napkin ring on that, or a place card holder if you give your guests at your holiday meals assigned seats. You can certainly put that on there. And the best thing about these being fabric, they're very eco-friendly, made out of cotton quilting fabric, wash and dry, and they're not that pricey to do. So if you end up with gravy stains on one you can't get out, it's okay. Just buy an extra yard of fabric so you have some that you can replace for next year. Alrighty, so I'm going to switch over to be in front of my serger. So just give me a moment and I'll be right back with you. Alrighty, so let's see. Yes, you can indeed see my serger. Wonderful. And I'm working here on the Amber S400 serger. This is an air threading serger. I'm going to take this front tray off just a moment to show you. There are threading chambers here and a manual lever that you raise and lower to thread the loopers when your chambers are closed here. So that's how that threading works. I've already pre-threaded for you. And I have set this for a rolled edge. So what exactly is a rolled edge? You might be asking yourself. If you're newer at serging, the term may be a little unfamiliar to you. A rolled edge is typically done with 3 threads or 2 threads, and that edge is folded over by the serger. So here's my table napkin and a close-up of that rolled edge. So I'm seeing on this side the thread that's going across the stitches. That is my upper looper thread. In the case of the Amber 400, it's the 3rd space over in my threading. So it is my red thread path. Let me tilt up just a bit for you. There you go. So I have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's my 3rd thread path is my upper looper. So a sewing machine works differently than, a serger works differently than a sewing machine in that there are no bobbins in a serger. Instead, you have loopers. And those loopers act a lot like a knitting needle. So if any of you are knitters out there, you probably can relate. So looking up close here, this is the upper looper. It is going up and over the foot. It may also be referred to as the right looper in some manuals. So this one right here, where my finger is, that is my upper looper. So it's coming up and over the foot. Inside the machine, almost laying parallel with the bed of the machine, is the lower looper or the left looper. It stays under the foot the entire time. I'm going to simulate serging by just turning my hand wheel so that you can see that those 2 loopers go up and down, and the needle thread here is what holds those stitches together. So again, if you are a knitter, you may think of the yarn over process as being the needle thread in a serger, and that is what forms a stitch in knitting. That's what forms a stitch in a serger. I'd love to be able to run the serger for you and slow that down so you can see it in action. However, there is a safety on all modern sergers today that you actually can't step on your foot control and make it go because they don't want you to get your fingers caught in the moving parts. So turning the hand wheel manually is the best I can do to show you how that function works. Now, there's another part of the serger called a stitch finger. And a stitch finger is a flat piece of metal that is going to come out right underneath the end of the foot, back in here, back under the knife blade. And that stitch finger is what keeps the serger stitches flat. You actually start serging without any fabric underneath your presser foot. And as your fabric feeds through, the stitch forms onto the foot. Forms onto the fabric, excuse me. So that stitch finger, its job is normally to keep the fabric flat from falling off the edge. So you make a nice, beautiful flat stitch. In a rolled edge application, we need to disengage or remove the stitch finger. And in the case of both our Amber S400 and our Amber Air 600, both of them have a stitch finger that we just have to slide a little lever, and it'll either put it in place, or if I back it out now, it'll move it out of the way. Now, you're saying, Kathy, you just said you need a stitch finger to make a nice flat stitch, and that is true. However, in a rolled edge, we actually don't want the stitch to be flat. We want the stitch to roll to the back side. So now you're seeing the back side of my serger stitch, and the thread that you're seeing coming over the top. That is that upper looper thread, and it's joining the lower looper thread and the needle thread right here at the inside edge of that stitch. If I were to snip into my fabric, in fact, I have a piece of fabric that has a rolled edge. I'll just snip into it for you. Let's see here. When you snip into a rolled edge, see if I can get that in focus for you, the fabric is folded over. I know that's difficult to see. Even in person, it's difficult to see. But my fabric, because I moved the stitch finger out of the way, the fabric kind of fell off the edge of the plate. And that's what I want it to do. And then the tension settings on the serger help that thread to roll over and to bring that raw edge of the fabric to the back side. So that's the process of making a rolled edge. So let's see this in action. Grab a unused piece of fabric here. So my settings on the Amber 400 are, my tensions are set at normal. On the face of the Amber Air 400, I have a setting for tight, and that's the only setting I need to change for my tension to do a rolled edge. On many sergers, you do actually manually adjust your tensions. Typically, you are tightening the lower looper, going to a higher number, so that helps to pull the rolled edge to the back side. Occasionally, you may need to reduce your upper tension just a bit so that it has a little more flexibility to roll to the back side. Your needles, typically, you can just leave them at normal settings. So if you're working with a mechanical type serger, without a lot of bells and whistles, you can still get a beautiful rolled edge. You just need to know what your settings are. And I would highly recommend that you check your owner's manual or user guide for what those settings are on your serger. That's where you're going to get the best advice. Now, something unique about a rolled edge is that typically it's a denser stitch than a traditional serger stitch. So if we once again look at my little stitch right here, those stitches are pretty close together. So I have adjusted my stitch length dial, which is on the other side. You really can't see it from my camera, but trust me, it's over here on the right. I've set that down to the range. On this serger, it has an R for rolled setting, and depending on the thread I've put in my looper, that would be the third thread over, will depend on what kind of stitch length I might want to have. I'm looking for a different spool of thread because I don't want to unthread my serger for you. So hold on just a moment. There we go. I want to show you the type of thread I have in my upper looper, which is going to be my pretty thread that's going to show. So the thread I have is a texturized nylon thread. Many companies make this. You're looking for something that is a untwisted thread. You can see that it's very open, and when you pull it tight and let go, you see that it kind of fluffs out. It's a very soft thread. It's used a lot in the garment industry, and it makes a beautiful rolled edge because the softness of the thread fibers just fill the space very nicely. So that is the thread type that I have in my upper looper. I do have, it's white, so you just really can't see it too well. But I do think we are ready to actually serge. Let me give you just a slightly better view of my foot. There we go. And again, when you serge, you actually don't need to lift up the presser foot to get started. The feed teeth on a serger, let me lift this up. I don't know if you can see it with my finger there. The feed teeth are really long. So they're going to grab my fabric for me. My knife blade is right here. It's about 3/4 of an inch back from the tip of my foot. So my fabric is going to be trimmed before I get started. And I'm going to put my tray back in place. my scrap tray to hold my threads and go ahead and switch. So as you can see, I'm just trimming off a little bit of my fabric and ending up in the scrap bin. Now, as I get to the end of my strip, I'm just going to continue to serger off and then bring my thread around into my thread cutter. I've got the side back here and just trim that off. So I've just stitched a whole row of rolled edge on my strip of fabric. All right. So any questions, Amy or Meredith? Alrighty, let's see. Looks like we're doing okay so far. Wonderful. All right, if you'll just bear with me for 1 second, I'm going to switch cameras again. And in a minute, you'll be able to see something else. I'll just come back to you now. And there we go. Whoops, wrong way. The zoom is opposite of what you think. Here we go. So you kind of see my little pile of fabric over here at the Amber 600 serger. And we're going to revisit our long strip of green fabric that I just serged for you. But first I want to talk about another stitch. And hold up just a minute. I'm going to reposition you so you can see a little bit more. And maybe I'll just turn you that way. Okay. Alrighty. So on the Amber 600, we have a wonderful touch screen that will really assist you in selecting stitches. Okay. Now, the Amber 600 is a 5-thread serger, so I have more spaces for more threads. Today I have it set up for a 2-thread stitch because on many sergers, instead of doing a 3-thread rolled edge, you can do a 2-thread rolled edge or other 2-thread type stitches. So I'm going to show you on the Amber 600. Oops, let me get my stylus here. This is a touch screen, and I can show you that we have a lot of different choices in thread. I know the reflection's a little hard to see, but I'd like to encourage you to stop in at your dealer and see the Amber 600 in person. Test it out. So in the stitch menu, I have a number of 5-thread, 4-thread, 3-thread, and then I have some 2-thread choices here. Now I have selected a 2-thread narrow edge, which is stitch 18. There is also a 2-thread rolled edge, which is number 22. For this next little project, I wanted a flat, balanced effect. I didn't want the stitch finger I want the stitch finger in place to keep my edges flat. So I don't want that rolled look, but I want the closeness of the stitch. I want it to look like a rolled edge, but not actually rolled over. So this time I picked the 2-thread narrow edge, which again is stitch 18. When I select it, it's going to show me which threads I'm using and also what it looks like. So in this case, I'm using my needle and one of my loopers. And then if I go into my settings, it shows me right here that I do need to use, this is the most important thing, I need to use my 2-thread converter to tell the serger I'm not using both loopers. Okay. And then there is a second set of informational settings. It tells me what it's used for. Now, I'm not using it for the purpose it intends for today, which is overcasting a single layer of light to medium weight fabric. I'm going to be doing just some decorative edging with that. Now let me come back here and choose, let's see here. Perhaps I gave you the wrong information. 2-thread overlock wide. That's the one I want. It's the same stitch. It's just a different needle position. And in serging, there really isn't a width control. The two factors you have that control stitch width are where your needle is, if you're just using one needle, right needle or left needle. Not all stitches can you interchange those needle positions, but with some you can. And rolled edges and wrapped 2-thread is a second one that you can vary that with. And the other variable as far as how wide the stitch would be is your cutting width. So you kind of have to equate the stitch width control in a sewing machine to the cutting width. That is the best I can equate that for you. Now, I want to show you what this stitch finger looks like. Or I'm sorry, not what the stitch finger looks like, what the 2-thread converter looks like. So I'm just going to drop my camera a bit so you can see this. On the Amber 400 and 600 both, the 2-thread converter is actually physically already attached to the machine. And I have it engaged right here, the tip of my pen. It's a little hook. And if I move it out of the way, you can see that hook. That hook has to, it goes in behind the eye of the looper. And it sort of fakes out the looper. It makes the looper think that there's thread in it when there really isn't thread. Because if you've ever been serging and you break one of your looper threads, you don't get a stitch, do you? It just kind of falls apart on you. So we have to have a way to let the serger know that, yeah, we're going to tell you it has thread, but it really doesn't. So that's what a 2-thread converter does. Now, I see that there's a question, but before I get there, I need to ensure that I don't have any thread caught when I re-engage my 2-thread converter, or else my thread will not cooperate, and it may still not since I made that with the stitch in place. So let me just do a little test run and make sure we're still making a stitch without any problems. I think cross our fingers will be okay without me rethreading the serger. So let me come and look at this question here. So the question is, do all sergers fold the edge of the fabric over, or do they just put a tight rolled look with the thread just laying on the fabric? So all sergers, like going back to the serger I bought when I graduated from college quite a few years ago, can do a rolled edge. So that means that stitch finger can be adjusted out of the way. And a true rolled edge is when you don't use the stitch finger. You move it out of the way so that the fabric can kind of fold or fall off the edge of the regular stitch plate, and then the thread wraps it under. That's a rolled edge. The other look, which I'm going to show you next, is a look that gives you that nice tight edge, but it's not actually rolling the fabric over. So we are indeed using the stitch finger for this particular technique. Okay, I hope that answers your question. If not, put a clarifying question in there and we'll take a look at that again. So let me just do a little serge off here. Make sure I'm throwing a stitch. It looks like I am. And this time I need a different. Let's see, it's out of reach of my camera. Let me just grab my other fabric strip that I had prepared. Let's see here. Where did you disappear to? Well, you know, the best laid plans. Sometimes things just run away from you, right? Well, I can certainly punt. So we're going to just show you a little bit on one of my test fabrics. And I'll call that good. Okay, so you're able to see my camera well. And this time I'm serging with red thread. It's a little more visible for you. And my fabric setup is that I have strips of 2 fabrics, come back to you, fused together just with a temporary fuse. I just use some Wonder Under type fusing to hold that together. That gives it a little bit of body, which will be good for our finished project. And I'm going to, again, just cut off the littlest bit as I serge. Get my hand out of the way for you. So you can see I'm just trimming a small amount. Now don't judge my serging by, I'm sitting sideways at the serger, so, you know, I'm not exactly in the best ergonomic position. I do want to adjust my stitch length down a bit so it's a little closer. And the Amber 600 also has a built-in thread cutter, makes life real easy. So here I just have that wrapped edge. It's a very open edge as I had it set. Now let me come and show you the close-up of the dent stitch that I had. Okay. So that's ideally what I want it to be. And for this project, what I'm doing is I cut strips of my fabric about, I did about 2 inches wide or so, fused the 2 fabrics together, and then I cut each strip down to 8 inches. Now I'm going to come back to my advisor, and I want to choose a different stitch. I actually want to choose the flat lock stitch. Now, what a flat lock stitch is, flat lock stitch allows you to put 2 pieces of fabric together and then pull on the seams, and it opens up the seam for you. And you'll see in a minute why we want to do this. So going into my sewing advisor, this is showing me I'm still going to use the left needle and then my upper looper. So the same thread setup I have now. And the description of what the stitch is used for sewing fabrics together with a decorative effect, either with the flat lock side or the ladder side. So what that means is one side will look like straight lines of stitching going across the seam. The other will have a curvy, what a traditional serger stitch would look like. And then my setup is showing me on screen. Let me come back up for you. My setup on screen is showing me what size needle to have in place, so it's a 90 needle. I'm using needle position A, which I'm already set for. My stitch width should be 6.5. And then my tension settings, my speed settings are here, my differential, and then my stitch length. I am going to shorten that stitch length down to 1 so that it's a little bit shorter. And I am going to next, let you see what I'm going to do. First off, I'm going to take one of my 8-inch pieces. I'm going to fold it in half. Doesn't matter which side I put together for this part of the project. And I'm going to serge along that edge, closing up my loop. So let me get positioned here. Get my fabric underneath. Alrighty, come on, guys. Let's increase my stitch length just a bit. There we go. All right, I'm just going to make a little bit of a change here because I'm now going through 4 layers of fabric. It's a little bit for my flat lock stitch to do, but you can see on one side I have my satin stitch, on the other I just see the ladder stitch. And I'm going to pull this stitch. Now, granted I didn't do a good job of lining up my 2 edges, but you know, it's a little challenging to sew on live camera, so I hope you'll forgive me for that. And this will make this seam flat, so I don't actually have like a folded over edge there. And the next step that we do, let me just get rid of these tails so visually you're not looking at those. We take a second strip and give you a little bit more of a view. We take a second strip of fabric and we place it inside our loop. I bet some of you can guess what I'm making. And we're going to fold that in half so that we have a piece of chain, and we are going to serge those pieces together. Now, of course, you don't want to use pins when you're using a serger because pins can be very detrimental to your knife blade should you actually manage to sew on a pin, sew through a pin. So using those little clips that the quilters like so much is a perfect choice for you. And then again, here's our seam. This again is our flat lock seam. One flat side, one satiny side, and then we pull on it. And by just tugging on that, that seam ends up being flat end to end to each other both ways. Okay. Now, the nice thing about making this chain with 2 different fabrics is that you can alternate your chain loops. So you can do a different fabric on either side. So let me do just one more for you to make sure you have this. I loved making paper chains when I was in grade school. They were the most fun. We got to make new ones every year since they didn't really keep well. Usually they ended up crushed in the box. Oops, I missed my cutter there. So again, here's my seam. I'm just tugging on that, nice, easy. And on this fabric, you see a better contrast of what the ladder side is. Those rows of stitches. That's what we refer to as the ladder side on a flat lock. Now, in reality, before I would trim all of these little tails, I would use one of the many brands of seam sealant out there, the Freight Check or the No Fray products, and I would just put a dot on each end before you continued on making your chain. But isn't that a nice way to use up some of your leftover Christmas fabrics or holiday fabrics and make a fabric chain that you can use every year? Meredith, do we have any questions? Let me come back to the chat. It looks like I might have missed a few. Okay. So, question about what was the name of the red thread I used for the rolled edge? That thread is I purchased mine at a big box store, and it was by the Gutermann Company. And I believe their name on the package was texturized nylon. I know that there are different brand names, but if you look in your sewing store or your dealership for serger threads that are texturized nylon, that's just a general term for different brands of thread. So it's a nylon thread that looks thinner when it's stretched out, and then when it's relaxed, it fills in. Okay. All right, and what else do we have here? What size needle is best for the knit thread? Oh, for the stretch thread. So I'm only using my woolly nylon in my loopers today. You can put it in your needle. I would probably use a 90 needle. I'd use whatever your serger recommends. Most of them recommend size 75s or 90s. They can be a little bit more challenging to thread because they are so loose on the end. It's hard to get that to poke through a needle. So a little trick I have for threading, grab a different color of serger thread here, is I'll take just a little piece of regular serger thread or sewing thread, tie an overhand knot, tie the two together. So you get those ends together for you. So just tie a little overhand knot, or you could tie a square knot. That would work as well. Don't think I can do that one though on camera. Pull that knot tight, and if you pull it tight enough, you should be able to pass the traditional thread through the eye of the needle, and then just pull that knot through to get it into your needle. Especially if you're working a size 90 needle, that should pass through. A 75, it may not. But many sergers do have built-in needle threaders now, and that makes life so much easier for threading those needles. Okay. Question about how do you knot the seams so it doesn't unravel? I presume you're asking just in general, a general question about doing your seams. So on this little chain project, because it's not a garment that's going to get worn, and it may get washed, but probably very minimally, you can just use a dot of seam sealant of Fray Check or Fray Block or some of the brands that I've seen in the big box stores. Your dealer may carry a different product. It's liquid. It's sort of like a glue, and it's clear, dries clear. You just put a dot on the thread tail. So let's see here. Let's find a thread tail. There we go. I would put a dot on my thread tail right at the end of my seam here. I would let it dry. If I was really impatient, I'd go get my hair dryer and I'd air dry it real quick. And then once that is dry, trim that tail off and your thread will not unravel. Sort of like in the old days when people wore pantyhose, they would use nail polish on a runner. Well, you can do the same thing with Fray Block or Fray Check. On a construction, when you're constructing a garment with a serger, typically when you cross a seam, let's say you're making a t-shirt and you cross your shoulder seam with your sleeve seam or your neck finish, that's enough to reinforce that stitch. If you need to finish an edge and you're not crossing that seam with something else, you can tie off the tails. You can just smooth out the thread chain and tie a little knot close to the cut edge of the fabric, or you can use a darning needle and thread the remaining chain in and pass it back through the stitching. That's a secure way to do your thread chains as well. All right. Can you use metallic threads? Sure. You can use metallic threads. All righty. So I want to do one more thing for you. I know our time is getting low, but just give me a moment here. Oops. And I will change the foot on my serger and change the stitch on my machine. So I want to show you, let me give you something to look at while, and look at my little Christmas tree right there. Okay. While I set the machine back up for this, for this job. So I want to go just to a standard overlock stitch. I'm going to keep it at 2 threads. I'm going to change out my plate. My foot. I don't need to change out the plate. I'm going to be putting the gathering foot on, and I'll come back so you can see that on camera in just a moment. Just will take me a minute because I'm at the wrong angle, of course, to pop this on. And I want to show you how easy it is to gather with your serger. Now I know for the Amber 400, the accessory feet are sold in a kit. There are 2 kits available for the Amber 400, and I have been told that our feet for our Amber 600 are coming out in the same manner here. Don't know if they've arrived yet. As with many things, there are some product delays here in getting some of our newer goods to market. And there we go. I've got my foot in place, so now I can bring it back. You don't need to see me struggle with that. Zoom in for you a bit. Bring you down. There we go. So here is the gathering foot, and it looks similar to the regular foot that I just took off, which is right here. But the gathering foot has an extra plate underneath it. So if I lift that up, you can kind of see that there's this extra piece of metal underneath it. Now there is a bypass channel on this, but we're not going to use the bypass channel today. We just want to use it to gather up our strips of fabric. I am going to make a change on my screen for my settings, because there are some factors that affect how much gathers you get when you use the serger. One of those factors is the stitch length. Just like on a sewing machine using a gathering foot, the longer the stitch length, the longer the in between your stitch that you have, and that will give you a better gather. More space between each stitch makes it gather more. That is what I'm trying to say. Then the second factor is something called differential feed. Differential feed is how the rate at which the feed teeth move in relationship to each other. On sergers with differential feed, there are actually 2 sets of feed teeth. There's one set in the front and one set in the back here. So there's two rows of them essentially, front to back. There's a little separation in them. It's the front feed teeth that you can adjust the speed on. So whenever you're adjusting differential feed, you're always adjusting the front set of feed teeth. By making the front feed teeth move faster than the back feed teeth, it's going to put more fabric into the stitch faster. So I'm increasing that differential feed. I'm maxing it out at the setting of 2 on my screen. So on my screen, I have it set at 2 for my differential, and then let me go up to 3 on my stitch length. Okay, that should be good settings. And we're going back to where I started this afternoon at with my long strip of green fabric. As you'll see in a minute what's happening. Let me do a little chain off just to make sure everything is back in where it needs to be, and let the machine make its noisy adjustments, but that's totally normal because remember, I was doing a totally different stitch, so the machine has to make those adjustments first. By chaining off, I kind of clear that. I'm going to place my raw edge, so I have a rolled edge, but my raw edge is the edge I'm going to actually gather. So I'm going to place this strip of fabric underneath my presser foot. Again, just trimming off a minimal amount of fabric as I sew. And you can already see how that's puckering back here. So I'm going to try to go a little slower so you can see that. And it wants to curl around. So I'm just going to make sure it doesn't curl all the way around. So we have just taken my flat strip of fabric and gathered it. Alrighty, so bear with me as I'm going to come back to you so you can see my face. So hang tight just a moment while I gather my things and come back to you. So I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I want to make sure I answer all your questions. I will come back at the after the event is over with and look for any additional questions you might have. So this is what we're after. We're after making a rolled edged Christmas tree. And this starts with the styrofoam cone. And on this finished sample here, I'm getting up close, I cut my Serger, my strips fairly wide. And I did add some embellishment with our sequin stitches on our Designer Epic 2 or Designer Ruby 90 to give it a little bit of bling. Okay, so you can certainly use any type of fabric that you would like and decorate it in any manner you like. The bottom edge of each ruffle is rolled edged and the top edge is gathered. Now for my tree topper, I just have some artificial flowers that I stuck into my styrofoam cone to make my tree topper. So you could do anything you'd like. You could put a little lace angel or lace star in there. So this is how that tree was made. Let me unwrap this. Now, this is just a little miniature for time's sake. My big tree, I liked better when I did different tiers. So as I wrapped my fabric around my styrofoam, I actually cut the fabric. So here's an instance where I cut it. I serged the short ends so they were nice and finished and just overlapped it a bit. And I did different tiers going up. On this little tree, because it's much smaller in scale, and I only cut my strips, they're just under 2 inches. They were about 1 3/4 inches that I trimmed them. I am just doing a little bit of a wrap, and I am at the moment just cheating and putting a straight pin in there to hold it. Ideally, this is one of those places that you would probably get out your glue gun and just glue this in place. But you can see that this tree is small enough and the ruffle is narrow enough. I can get away with just spiraling up my layers. So I'm getting to the end of that piece. So I'm going to, again, cheat and use a little pin to hold that in place and start my next piece. I would again use some fray check on the rolled edged area, and then once it's dry, trim it. For today, I'm just going to fold that under, kind of hide it, and then continue to spiral upwards all the way to the top. So this little tree, this is I think this is a 6-inch styrofoam cone, and it took me a little bit, like a strip and 3/4 or so to do. Now I don't have a topper for it, and I have extra fabric, so I'll just wind it around for you. There we go. And oh, there must be another pin. This is a sewing room after all, right? So I'll just stick a pin in there so I don't have to hold it for you. And there you go with your little Christmas tree. So again, something fun that you can do for decorating for the holidays. You know, a lot of people decorate with alternate colors for the holidays. They may want white trees or blue trees, or, you know, trees with snowflakes on them for their decoration. Make nice little table settings. You could do different size trees. You can get styrofoam cones in a lot of different sizes. There's several sizes in between here that I found at my local craft store, and you can make a really nice little place setting out of those. Okay, so going back to our questions, let's see. Someone asked, what were the settings for gathering, for differential, etc.? So My preference is to go to a longer stitch length. I like a stitch length of 3.0. And the longer the stitch length, the more gather you're going to get. And then I maximized my differential feed setting also with that set at 2.0 on this serger. That's the maximum on this serger. You may find that some sergers have a higher setting for their differential. Some do go up to 2.5. Just depends on the serger and what the mechanics and the electronics are on that serger, but going up or to the positive side. My very first serger didn't really have numbers on it. It just had positive and negative. So if you wanted more differential, then you went positive. If you needed less, you went to the minus side. So that's how that works. All righty. So we have, you can continue to put your questions in. We do have a couple of additional announcements. Our next Facebook Live is going to be December 7th. This is our next Husqvarna Viking Facebook Live at 2 p.m. Central Time with Wendy. She is exploring fabric manipulation techniques, and that will be our last Husqvarna Viking Live for this year, for 2022. But not to worry, all of us educators do have our schedule for our 2023 live. So we're already working on 2023 for you all. And then in our My Sewnet Facebook Live, that live is on December 14th at 2 o'clock Central Time. And that is going to be with Mickey Hudson. And we are going to learn all about the Family Tree Wizard. And once again, that is the last My Sewnet Live for this year. So, well, Meredith and Amy, it's been great spending the afternoon, and thank you for helping me solve my earlier technical difficulties. I appreciate that we have some support in the background. I know the audience doesn't get to see you, but believe me, we all appreciate everything you do for us in the background. So, again, if you have questions, feel free to come back to the recorded live and you can do a post, and Amy and Meredith will make sure that I see any questions that need an answer. Thanks for joining me and have a great day. Bye-bye.